This is Erin Perkins, and this is my case study for EDL 854 on the missing Booster Club funds. Just to kind of summarize our situation here, we have Mr. Stevens, who is the principal of George Washington Middle School, which is a relatively small middle school. He doesn't have an assistant to help out with a lot of the after-school activities, so he relies a lot on parents to help when he cannot, especially in the matters that come to parent PTA funds, booster club funds, those sorts of things. Despite being in a lower socioeconomic status community, parents are very involved um, in the PTA and booster club funds and even other daily activities in the school. We have one mom in particular, Mrs. Bowman, who has helped out for quite some time. She's on her third kid coming through the middle school, and at this time is requesting PTA funds being used to fund her daughter's trip for a cheerleading competition, which will cost around $800. And she asked Mr. Stevens, the principal himself, for the approval of this, which he did not give, saying that the funds were raised by the PTA are to benefit more than just one student. After the last home basketball game, which drew in a huge crowd for this community, funds were missing when Mr. Stevens went to go do the final count just before he deposited the money that was made that evening. So some problem identification analysis we have here. What do we know? We know based on a parent who came in, Mr. Dumas, that there is a $50 bill that was apparently spent that evening that is not in the register as Mr. Stevens, the principal, looked at it. There's a discrepancy between the reported ticket sales and the number of tickets sold. As Mrs. Bowman reported that there were 10 tickets that were not used because they had been torn. But again, the funds don't match up with those 10 tickets not having been used. And Mrs. Bowman was one of the people working the ticket gate sale funds where the funds are missing. We might have some reason to suspect that she could be associated with this missing money, considering that she had just been denied her request to have that money spent on her daughter's cheerleading competition. What do I need to know? One, where the missing money is. Also, can the person who worked the gate with Mrs. Bowman shed some sort of light on the things that happened, because the PTA does set up a system where more than one person works each space at a time, which is positive. You need more than one person who's going to handle the money to ensure that fraud isn't happening. And if these tickets were torn, then they should have been in the cash drawer to show or prove that, not necessarily just tossed out and thrown away. So again, somebody else knows and can account for the fact that the tickets were indeed torn and were not able to be used. So my proposed plan of action, 3 different strategies we need to implement are: 1, have the discrepancy documented, especially until it can be resolved. The record books need to show where this discrepancy was while it's under investigation. Secondly, I would interview our gate ticket keepers, both Mrs. Bowman and whoever her partner was, because again, the PTA sets up this 2 people work each system. So talk to them both separately, talk to them together, see if you can piece together the events of the evening, inquire what happened with that missing bill as well as those missing torn tickets. And then also we need to take this matter to the PTA, who is ultimately responsible for the funds, and work with them to resolve this issue along with whatever information that you've gathered from having these interviews. It is not something that the principal necessarily needs to reconcile completely on his own, because again, it is the PTA's issue. They're the ones collecting the funds, which he has been working very closely with them as he relies on them being the only administrator in the school. However, they have some weight and some say in here as well. It's in the best interest that that all of these funds that the PTA money creates goes directly to supporting the entire school, which is part of the reason why when Mr. Stevens was approached with, can this be used just for my daughter, he did not approve. That's just making sure that money that's being raised is going for everyone's sake. This missing money came from a basketball game ticket sales that the whole community got involved with, as we saw that this was one of their bigger games that they had. um, so the PTA monies again go school-wide, not just for one person. And this event was widely community supported, so they kind of have a little stake in the fact too that money is missing also. Something else that I found a little curious in this situation was um, it might make sense if Mrs. Bowman were to have um, taken her question about funding her daughter's cheerleading expense if it would have one been an activity that had been related to cheerleaders that they could have been able to pull the money from um, more directly so than just a basketball game, but two, if she would have brought the issue up to the entire PTA and not just to the principal who's not necessarily completely in charge of that organization. um, because I would imagine that they may not have been able to finance the whole thing, but let's see what we can do and put together to raise funds in this capacity for someone who is representing our community. So when we take a look at the problem, then who should field requests to use the PTA funds? Really, should it be the principal who's fielding all of those? Hey, can we use this money for that? Can we use this money for this sort of thing? Does it need to go to the whole PTA? Also getting more faculty involvement. It's talked a lot about how Mr. Stevens is the only one who does a lot of these after school extracurricular activities. He may need some more faculty sponsors to assist him in monitoring the cash flows in the concessions and the ticket sales and just being able to monitor the whole situation when there are students at the school involved so that he's not the only one um, in charge, so to speak. There's, some other people that could be trained to be backups to know the procedures for the cash flow. And it's not just all falling on him. And also, when you come to the procedures before your volunteers leave for the evening, um, making sure that you're there to count the money with them, reviewing the documents that they've set up, and if they did have torn tickets, that you can account for them together, so it's not just someone leaves and you're basing it on a note they've written or hearsay from someone else. Also having rotating parent volunteers, so you don't just have the same ones who are holding down the same duties at every single time. That may be something that the PTA needs to look into when they set up, who can work certain events, who's in charge of what, how many people they need to have on each different part. Um, so in this situation, promoting effective and efficient management, things that need to be addressed are ensuring that funds are being properly used. Again, money coming from the parent organization being used for the greater school community, not just one sole person, which is what Mr. Stevens was trying to do. Ensuring that the funds are properly accounted for, making sure you follow through some sort of checkout procedure with the person in who's actually working it, not just relying again on the notes that they may leave when they leave, and ensuring procedures for financial accountability. Again, having all of those documents and those steps in place to cover all of those things before everyone goes home for the evening. How would this promote social learning for every student? Well, if you advocate for money to be used for the benefit of the whole student population, again with that funding use, asking the PTA to hold separate fundraising events to finance special causes like Mrs. Bowman's daughters. That could have been something that he could have presented both to Mrs. Bowman and to the PTA. Hey, I'm not going to say that we can use all of this money for that, but maybe we can talk to the PTA, see what sort of fundraising you think can come up, because I agree this is important that she's representing our school district at this competition, but there might be a better way to go about it than just handing over the money. And also bringing other faculty members into extracurricular duties to engage them more in community efforts shows students that teachers can be involved in things beyond the classroom. How does this then promote student academic learning? Also, If your funds are being used for a variety of reasons throughout the community, from athletics to academics, then you look like you're not pulling favoritism in one way or another. Having a proper management of funds that spans across the curriculum shows, again, no favoritism and leadership integrity, which allow for the most trust to be placed on the decisions that an administrator may make in all areas of school management. And then if you were to pull in more faculty to help with these events, delegating, sharing responsibilities at events such as these allows the administrator to make more efficient decisions with less stress, which impacts on all the decisions that he'll make within the school, not just the financial decisions. If he can find ways to take some of that stress off himself, to be able to share those responsibilities with some strict written out procedures and follow through with what happens there, that would probably make him a more efficient, more trustworthy, and reliable administrator.